3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Force podcast, a podcast from 3 Puerto Rican friends coming together to do deep dives into Star Wars and other nerd-related media. This is season 3, episode 8, and remember to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Remember also that we are part of the Amidala Initiative, a fundraising campaign in favor of trans rights. So if you haven't, check it out. We leave all the links at the bottom. We have all the information on Twitter, so check it out. And without further ado, we are going to continue our conversations about one of the shows that we believe is really underrated, but we love a lot, Star Wars Rebels. Now, we said we were going to be talking about different themes, and today we're going to be talking about all those amazing creatures throughout the show that have a connection to the Force, that call into the lie that only Sith and Jedi can have Force powers. So what do we think about all these amazing creatures throughout Rebels?
It's a great expansion to the lore, the experience of what Star Wars is. You know, it is more inclusive. It promotes. We do have to remember. I mean, ultimately, we're all like adults loving this cartoons, but they are children's cartoons. Like there has to be a central theme that promotes compassion and more empathic understanding of your surrounding. What is your impact in nature? You know, especially growing up, we believe the world and the universe revolves around us, and that is never the case. Like we have to learn how to, you know, let aside our idea of being the center of everything and see how we are just one of everything. And I think the portrayal of like force sensitive and like creatures just enriches what the Force is. What is the idea of like since the beginning, like it's been told, like the Force is that it binds us, it combines us, it's everything around us, it's life, it's so the hubris of humans to think that only the Jedi and the Sith are the ones that have like exclusive power or authority over this Force. It's naive, to say the least. And I think that's what it shows us, that the Force is way more mysterious than any of the schools that we've been taught, while at the same time showing that just because you don't understand certain things doesn't mean you can commune with them, you can't be at peace with them. And even from both sides, like I think Ezra and Kanan to some degree show us that by letting aside those like ego-based experience that, oh yes, I'm the only one that knows how to use the Force and manipulate it or use it, and just surrender to that experience, then there's an aspect of growing. Not only Ezra, I mean, we see Ahsoka, we see Sabine, we see all of the characters influenced. Thrawn, you see like at the end, all of them are influenced by Force sensitive creatures that do not use words, but they do use and understand the Force to some degree and effort. And I think that's beautiful. Like I was very excited. I think that's one of the things that I just loved about Rebels, is the fact that it includes and expands to how the Force uses and is influenced through nature in a very holistic approach, and while at the same time being a teaching instrument for everybody from every age.
Yeah, that's really well put. I mean, it's because there is growth not only when they commune with these creatures, there's growth in their knowledge of the Force, and their power grows as well, you know, because throughout that understanding, I mean, when Kanan first encounters the Bendu, he had been blinded, and the Bendu teaches Kanan to expand his sight through the Force, something that Kanan would have never believed was possible. And this creature is teaching him all these things. Like it's this mystery about the Force. And I think what the show does also is we see it's also this love, like you were saying, of nature, but you know, the planet itself, it harkens back very much to the whole, you know, Mother Earth kind of mentality, how these creatures are kind of part of that earth and are trying to protect their own planets, and are part of how that force works specifically to those planets. And then obviously we see a lot of it in Lothal because the show is very centered around it, but we see a lot about it, in Attilan with the Bendu and everything. So I think it's very, very good to start, aiming all that kind of awareness into children, that it's not just human centered. It's about nature and the creatures that we share the world with and all of that. So it is one of the things that I really loved about Rebels that I was not expecting when I started watching it. And I was like, wow, this is so good. And it's so different from a lot of what we've seen in Star Wars. And I really hope that we get more of that again in Star Wars shows. So we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting, right? Because for me, like the first takeaway that I had from seeing like how these animals or beasts, right, or however we're framing this part of nature, right, this living part of nature, it's that it's diametrically opposed in a way to how we've seen creatures usually framed in other media, especially when looking at locally with Star Wars, especially with the Clone Wars, which every time I think about Clone Wars, I think about the Zillo Beast, and I always think about that arc of episodes and how tragic it is that it's just like the last creature of its kind, and instead of us being kind to it, the show just decides to destroy it. And it's I mean, obviously there's a purpose to it because it's Palpatine showing that he doesn't care about life. He only cares about what he can gain from something else for his own power, which in that narrative it kind of makes sense. But in the whole of the show, right, we don't have like that sensibility to creatures in the kind of poetic sense that Rebels does. So every time we encounter like a loth-cat or a loth-wolf or the Fyrnocks or the Purrgil or the spiders, right? Especially with the scarier animals that are supposed to be like the evil ones that are out to get you. The show kind of pivots from being like, well, should we just be afraid of like an animal just because it looks scary? Should we just pivot away and think that they're an enemy because they're defending themselves? It's like, and it's what you were getting at, Mo. It's like we're the protagonists of our story, so we always think that someone that is in opposition in one circumstance, it's our enemy. And I think we do that with creatures all the time. It's just like, okay, this is a scary looking creature, and they're defending themselves, against me because they're afraid of me. So in my hero mentality, my ego self, then they're my enemy and they're a creature that I have to destroy. And that's always, or not always, but usually how narratives are built around creatures. It's like, oh, this is an obstacle to slay, right? The mythical dragon, right? We have to slay the dragon, we have to slay the beast. And Rebels doesn't do that. It does the opposite. It's like, no, because we are all part of that cosmic force, right? We're all part of the living force. And it ties thematically very directly in that sense to the Yoda arc when he, goes to the force and meets the wills and sees that connection that we always talk about. We always talk about, oh, the force is in everything, blah, 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 blah. But then when we have to kill an animal, we don't think, we don't think twice about it. So I think
just like minorities.
Right. Exactly. It's like, oh, this is not who we are. Yes, it is. It always has been. Well,
I mean, and there's this terrible treatment of, even if they're like your enemies, otherwise you have to either control them or tame them or make it your pet, or they're just pests that you swat out of your way, which was the treatment that they were doing to the Purrgils originally. Because if you remember, Hera was just like, they're pests. It doesn't matter what happens to them. They're involved in a lot of crashes. They're, total nuisances. And then the Purrgils end up saving the entire Ghost crew once, Ezra establishes a connection with them. And then it turns out that there's so much more than they seemed and can actually, cross space and time within themselves,
What an awesome creature. Like at first I remember seeing Rebels, and when the Purrgils came out, I'm like, are these space whales and space whales that can travel through hyperspace? And then I was like, this is, I'm not gonna say dumb, but weird. And like the more the Purrgils were on screen, I'm like, no, this is cool. This is like
it's cool. This is cool.
This is the kind of weird that I like. Like this is exactly what Star Wars needs, and the Purrgils are so fun, and it's an innocent animal that's just like so pure in its existence, and
and just trying to
colorful.
travel the galaxy and be on their way and do their migrations or whatever it is that they're doing. And then at the end, they're the key to defeating Thrawn. So this character that you kind of see in this one episode early on, and it seems like a standalone little episode that's really cool, that we can see these whales that can travel through hyperspace. And then the Bendu has that episode with Thrawn that tells Thrawn that his demise was going to come from like cold arms grabbing him and everything. And then you see the end, and it's the tentacles of the Purrgil just wrapping everything and going into hyperspace. And it's so well conceived, the entire series. I love it.
Yeah, we're gonna see Purrgils in live action in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Mark my words. That's a joke. We're not, although it would be awesome if we did.
It'll be amazing.
Just Obi-Wan riding a Purrgil to go and rescue someone. That would be don't get me started. I got excited all of a sudden. And you don't want the enthusiasm I had on last episode. Gotta bring it down from last.
You gotta
time.
bring it down. Bring it back. Come back.
Yeah. Gotta bring it
down. Hey,
down.
it's Obi-Wan's thirst cave.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was a good name. I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little tough.
Yeah. It's just like, hey, good job.
Well, anyway, I think now that we've talked, kind of in general how we feel about it, I think we should get into some specifics. And I think one of the more impressive ones, obviously, the Bendu, the one in the middle. What did we think about this? Incredibly powerful, wise.
Can we consider the Bendu a beast? Because he has like a consciousness. So like I would consider him more of a being, right?
I mean, and that's what I would call all of them kind of
right?
beings, because I think there's different levels of consciousness that we see in some of these beings, because you have the Loth-cats that are kind of, you can tell that they're kind of force sensitive. You can connect with them, but they're cats. They're just kind of into themselves mostly.
Cats are into chaos, correct.
And then you have, up on the scale, then you have the Loth-wolves, who at first just appear like they are a little bit more force sensitive, but then we find out that they can actually communicate. They actually know language and can actually speak. And then we have the Bendu, who seems to have been around forever, probably before even Jedi and Sith, and he's the one in the middle. But he's still a being, because he's a non-humanoid character, I think, that is more in touch with his own planet than with everything that's going on around him. So I think the Bendu, even though he's way above that and clearly even more intelligent than humans themselves, would still classify, just because others would see it still as a creature. And that's how Kanan kind of identified the Bendu. But the Bendu is above and beyond what our human understanding would be.
Yeah, I think the Bendu, to me, like you describing it that way, to me, the Bendu is kind of like Tom Bombadil in Lord of the Rings. It's like this random ass character that just shows up, and it's very in tune with everything. And I was reading, because since no one really knows anything about Tom Bombadil, because he's just in the one chapter of Lord of the Rings, there's lots of like theories about like the character itself. So I was going through the YouTubes and seeing videos trying to explain what
Tom Bombadil is.
That's a deep,
apparently, and this is according to Tolkien to an extent, and obviously I'm paraphrasing, so this is take it with a grain of salt, because I'm paraphrasing a lot. Like Tom Bombadil is one of the most ancient creatures in all of Middle Earth, and it's like incredibly powerful. And it's like so powerful that he can resist the temptation of the ring. And but he is so into nature and doing his own thing in his little part of the forest that he's disconnected from the do's and wants of the world around him. So that's probably if there's any Lord of the Rings fan that's like listening to this particular piece, I'm sorry. I did the best I could.
If you're wrong, we apologize.
Don't let like this Lord of the Rings book mislead you into thinking that I'm a Lord of the Rings expert. I'm not. So I'm sorry. But that is my understanding of Tom Bombadil, and that's kind of like how I see the Bendu now, especially with how you were framing him, they, right, in the show. Which I think that's kind of in a sense what he wanted to be, right, until he was forced to action, because he didn't really want to interfere, because he's in the middle, right? He's like, it's not my problem.
I'm the one in the middle.
And then like at the end, it's just like, okay, well, I gotta do something because Kanan's pushing my buttons up in this. So in a way, like the Bendu, besides being a Tom Bombadil type of character, he's kind of like the wills of the Force, right? That Yoda encounters in the cosmic Force. So except in the terrestrial plane, right, where like the wills were kind of like in the ethereal, Force, the netherworld type of thing. The Bendu is kind of like their counterpart in the real world type of thing, in the physical realm to that extent. So he's kind of like that nexus point of the Force, like in the living Force, and the wills are in the cosmic Force, and they're like these creatures that just kind of connect the Force with each other and connect nature and all these beings and beasts and creatures together through that Force. I don't know if that makes any sense. Mo, what do you think about the Bendu?
Well, since we're all speculating here, harking back to like what Nani said a little bit earlier about like the Force being more akin to Mother Nature. Like this could be like an avatar for a Gaia or something of that planet. Like, it's thousands of, it's like the living planet's consciousness come to, because like we see the Bendu not also being Force sensitive, but like controlling the environment and affecting like we see powers that are beyond just like what's been considered like regular Force powers. So there has to be like that connection with like the planet and like the transcendence of like the Force communing and like the planet just being self-aware. And this might just be like that manifestation of like nature self. I mean, it's clearly individual, that's for sure. Like I don't
so
think
in that sense, do you think can the Bendu in this theory, can the Bendu, is he like the room of requirement and he can be like wherever he's needed type of thing, or is he like exclusive to that planet? Each planet has its own Bendu, but they're individual consciousnesses, or is the Bendu like a one being that just is is not limited to the place, right, that it inhabits? It can just move around as it is required through the Force.
I feel like this one will be like more planet based. I think like just the
so
fact
there are Bendai.
They're Bendai. And then they're a combination of Bendai. And now we're getting into like Marvel territory. You got the Celestials and like the Grow, the Seed Grow. It's like.
Well, I mean, because it seems the Bendu is very attached to that planet specifically, because, when he finally gets pissed off and becomes the Storm, it's like, you brought war to my planet, so it seems very specific. And it makes me think about how the Loth-wolves are that same like form of manifested Force power for Lothal. Like, I think we can think about the planets themselves as how the different creatures themselves and humans and everybody can be, how like some planets are more Force sensitive than others. And then those planets that are really Force sensitive can kind of manifest their will through some of these creatures. And so it's like the will of the planet itself, maybe, acting as a guardian, a protector of the planet itself. So I don't know, it's really interesting. And then the Bendu and a lot of the creatures, and we'll get into it, I think also have something to do or some type of connection to the world between worlds, because in that first scene that we see the Bendu, you can see the Morai flying above the Bendu, and that the Morai is kind of a representation of the daughter. And then it's the Loth-wolves that first tell Ezra that he has to protect the secrets of the world between worlds. So it seems like there's a connection here, not only with the living Force, but with the world between worlds and the ethereal Force and everything. So it's all very good to speculate. I mean, we don't really know any of this for sure, but there's so many little details that bring so much more to the show than you would think on first viewing, that just make the world so much richer, because they think about how these creatures influence what's going on in the storyline. And these are only the ones that we encounter through our family in the Ghost. I mean, it opens up the possibilities of so many other creatures. There
are fantastic beasts. We just have to find them. Sorry, I had to do that, even though we do not support what's her name, but but I had to do it because it was right there. It was too good to let go.
And
That could
touche,
be a
I like
good-
it too.
That
Yeah.
could be like a good spin-off show from Rebels, just like, you know, like whatever is the equivalent of a magi zoologist in the force, well, like a force zoologist, and it's like all these force sensitive creatures, and someone's just like documenting them. That'd be a cool series. Just, you know,
Be a cool story.
finding
That would be a
Yeah.
really cool story, and see what they have, what
a
influence
Pokemon
they
Snap,
have.
but for Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's just like a Star Wars Snap. You're just taking pictures of
Snap.
all these force sensitive creatures.
Or push it out there, push a force sensitive creature to be like the center, the point of view from that creature.
Mhm.
And it could be a good series of YouTube shorts, and it's just like these little like 15-minute episodes, all the different creatures and just like their points of view through the force, which kind of like in a way like when Thais, and we're going like we're going now.
It's
It kind of reminded me of when you were talking at the beginning, Mo, a little bit, just it about how we usually see the force as like this exclusive thing that Jedi and Sith use, and it reminded me a lot of The Last Jedi when Luke is talking to Rey and he's trying to teach her about the force, and she's like, oh well, the force is just a power the Jedi have that allows them to, you know, lift rocks and stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, the force is not a power the Jedi have. And then like Luke just goes into explaining how the force is just life, and you know how it's life and death and all the processes in between, and it's connected to everyone. And I'm like, and that's why, boys and girls, The Last Jedi is the best Star Wars since the original trilogy to understand what Star Wars is. Anyway,
Yes.
closing that parenthesis.
Yeah.
And that ties into like Rebels and everything that we're talking about, because yeah, it's not just force jumps and force pulls, mind tricks and lightsaber battles. It's just life. And with the Loth-wolves specifically, that life that connects to the beyond to some extent. Because I think one of the really cool thing about the Loth-wolves too, and I think this is a question I have for everybody, is like, how do they connect to the netherworld, right? Because when Kanan became one with the Force, Doom, right?
Doom.
Like that Loth-wolf that this has like Kanan's essence or his spirit. What do you guys think? What's going on there? Was he able to kind of like commune through the Force through the wolf, or what was going on there? What's your guys' theory about what was happening with the Loth-wolf and Kanan, and you know, and that connection with Ezra that happened in Rebels?
I think you should
Nah, I
get us
guess I'll let
started
you
on
go.
this one, Mo. No, I think Mo.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Well, like I guess like we just have to make like parallels to like how the force clearly it's like based on different like religious and like cultural aspects of spirituality that us humans have gone through. And it's, you know, it's either this idea of the spirit animal, the idea that, you know, we ish possess like a spirit guide, or that connection between that spirit world and the physical reality. So that could be like one interpretation. You know, we're seeing this is Kanan's spirit like guide, and both in his afterlife and Kanan's like interaction with Ezra, because like there is that connection that always happens with like the familiar. So we could see, it could be seen that way. It could be seen like an avatar, you know, from more like perspective of like, you know, this just is the new manifestation of Kanan, you know, once Kanan passed away. And but all of them are just like that manifestation of like the force involving itself, and because it creates the idea that the force is way more, it's conscious.
Yes.
That there is a consciousness to the force. It's not just, it's not chaotic. It's actually, it's a consciousness that always tends towards balance. So if there is something that there's imbalance, then that will create an event to bring it back to balance. I think that's what we see, like, and the Loth-wolves, like, you know, we've as humans, like, we've been scared of wolves, like, but at the same time, it's from wolves that we have man's best friend, the dogs, which is like, it's like that idea that once we both get to know each other and we both get to like commune and co-evolve and develop each other's protecting, while at the same time protecting and taking care of each other, then
we can start artificially selecting them,
and you start
eagles and pugs.
But then you eventually get to like, instead of loth-wolves, loth-pugs. But you imagine like a pug just teleporting, like
loth-pugs.
It's like in the corner of your house. It teleports to the other corner. It's like, God damn it, just like.
Yeah, just like put me out of my
still.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I should not exist.
I should not exist.
But it will still have a strong connection to the force, though. A lot.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
It would not have as strong of an impact if Kanan had come back into a loth-pug instead of a loth-wolf, though.
Especially the giant Doom.
Right.
Because Doom is just this giant, powerful loth-wolf. I think the loth-wolves are really, really interesting because from the beginning, it was kind of assumed that they had gone extinct. So Ezra is really surprised when he first sees one. And the loth-wolves had helped Ezra along a little bit before they started, having the stronger connection with Kanan. So we had kind of seen them around and we kind of assumed that they were maybe a more evolved version of, the Loth-cats. But then we find out how strong they really are in the Force. And I think it's a lot with what you were saying, Mo, about it's the Force and the Force has a will, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with light side, dark side. It's about finding balance. Yeah, so those wolves had kept themselves kind of to the sidelines until the moment that the Sith and, the Empire breaks into the Jedi Temple and is trying to control the world between worlds. That's really when the Loth-wolves decide to act. Because if the Sith, if the Empire take control of the world between worlds, that would shift the balance in a way that could have been irrevocable, So that's when they decide to finally intervene. And I like that at that moment, first, they save our team from imminent destruction because they were about to be destroyed. And it's Ezra, obviously, that communes with them more, but then they have to wait for Kanan to make that connection. They were specifically waiting for Kanan. I don't know if they knew that it was Kanan's will that was ultimately going to spur everybody to really protect, the world between worlds and everything, maybe through his death, because the wolves seemed to know that it was coming, that Kanan's death was coming, and
dogs
that
know.
with
dogs know,
and that with that death, everybody was going to think twice about everything they did because they lost basically their leader. Ezra lost his mentor, a father figure, a brother figure, all of this. And you can see in how the treatment of the Loth-wolves after Kanan dies, that they kind of try to chase Ezra and Ezra runs and they get really pissed at him. Like, why are you fearful? Why are you running? Why are you doing this? And then that's when Doom shows up. And I think it is really a manifestation of Kanan's will that don't stop. You need to keep going. You need to protect the Jedi Temple because by you protecting that, you're protecting my family. You're protecting my wife. You're protecting my kid because he probably knew about the kid too.
He knows.
So,
he knows.
So it was this incredibly kind of just overprotective. You have to do this for me. You have to keep going. You can't give up. And there was something incredibly beautiful about the fact that especially Doom looks really scary, but is so wise at the same time. So it's a great interpretation of, Kanan died. Now I'm going to creep you out, but motivate you at the same time to protect everybody, protect this planet, protect my family.
Right.
I don't know.
But
yeah,
no, please.
No, like I was like the way you portrayed it also made me think like, what if it's not like Caleb's like actual? It's actually Ezra manifesting. Like you just lost. This is like the WandaVision of like the Force. Ezra using the force and like it's like
Projected to
manifesting,
himself.
projecting this idea that, you know, now this creature that I was afraid of now becomes my mentor. Because like at one point, Ezra was, you know,
Afraid of the
intimidated by,
Loth-wolves. Yeah.
afraid of both Loth-wolf and Kanan before like
Yeah.
they actually became friends.
True.
Like, so there is that resemblance of like, you know, now, you know, I need to be my own mentor, but that doesn't mean I have to be my own mentor. The force can project itself into the mentor I need to be.
I like that.
I like it. I dig it, even though I don't agree.
That's what it is.
But I dig it. But I dig it. I do think that there's a power to that, right? But I think there's also like a power to it being Kanan, because it also ties with the whole Obi-Wan thing. It's just like, you strike me down, I become more powerful than you ever imagined. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like like Star Wars making a point. It's like, okay, you know how it kind of looked like Obi-Wan was lying there because he didn't really do anything to prove that he was powerful in death. Well, here you go. Here's Kanan. He's not corporeal because he can't do it yet because you're not supposed to until then. But he's able to kind of transcend through the force in a way that I think is very sensitive to how Ezra and him communed with the force. And it's just like they've always had that connection with creatures, and especially Ezra, who's even stronger in terms of that connection. So I think it says a lot that like Kanan was able to come from the beyond in a way that was very sensitive to Ezra's sensibilities. And it's just like, hey, look, like these creatures, you've had connections before with creatures like this, so I'm coming to talk to you through a creature, which is a way that you're very empathetic through the force, and I will guide you as you learn to let go. But in doing so, he kind of leaves a lasting impression, I think, in Ezra too, because it's like, okay, I'm letting go through creatures, and that's how you connect to the force. So hopefully that connection strengthens itself even more, because now you'll see like that your mentor doesn't have to be corporeal, right? It can just be through the force, through the creatures, that you are able to find your strength through that force. So hopefully we get to see that more like going forward when we see Ezra eventually in live action and animation. He keeps communing with Kanan through other creatures, because that's how Kanan comes back, or maybe not. Maybe he just like through just his connection to animals, his force powers are strengthened. Doesn't necessarily have to be because he's talking to Kanan. It's just because he's being empathic with them, especially the Purrgil. I want to see Ezra have like a Free Willy moment where he's just like with the Purrgil and Shamu, and it's the whole all that stuff, and then Michael Jackson plays in the background. Make that happen. I want to see that in the Ahsoka show.
We just showed our age.
Doesn't matter.
It's completely fine.
Free Willy, it's a classic. It's a classic.
It is.
If not, have Ezra with like a little Purrgil, just like a baby Purrgil, just like chilling on his shoulder.
Well, I mean, and going back to the Purrgils, which it would be great to have, the little baby one. But it was really cool when Ezra first communed with the Purrgils, how his eyes became, star flecked and moving, continuously like the Purrgil's own eyes. So it's not just being able to communicate. It's kind of, Ezra lets his guard down so much that he's actually able to break down those walls and let those creatures in, and he can actually see their thoughts. So Ezra is not only able to communicate, but he's able to see the world from the eyes of all these different creatures, from their perspective. And I think that's what makes his character so profoundly powerful, because he not only sees through his own eyes and what he needs and everything, but he's able to expand all of that through seeing life from other creatures' perspectives, maybe creatures that have been treated badly throughout the history, and now he can empathize with all of them and grow.
And what better way to make a statement about how we should all be as human beings to each other than through that type of visual communication, right, in Rebels. And like you said, Mo, this is a show geared primarily towards, a younger audience. So I think that's an extremely good way to start talking about like how we empathize with our fellow human. It's just like, hey, they may look different, they may have different experiences, but if you just let your guard down, you just connect with them through the force. Oh, that was kind of epic when I said that the wind blew Mo's hair in a beautiful way.
Beautiful.
They had their eyes closed. I was like, oh yeah, there we go. The force wills everything.
Just with this.
But yeah, we can connect with everyone in a better way. So I think those lessons transcend how Rebels kind of teaches us to, see creatures and animals, but also how we just see ourselves and others, because we always have to just connect with everyone else as we want to connect with ourselves, because there's always a little bit of ourselves and someone else, because we're all going through similar experiences. And I think that's what Ezra sees when he touches, these creatures through the force, especially like the Fyrnocks. So they look dark and they're dark sidey creatures, but he sees darkness in them, but the same darkness that he might have inside of him. And that doesn't mean that makes you inherently dark. It just means that you're going through stuff too, man. And we're just trying to live. We're just trying to be cool with each other. So I think Rebels is really impressive in that sense. And I think the show is a wealth in that sense. Like the more you dig into it, the more you find it's a gem, man. And it's just it's a polished gem. We just keep polishing it, and it just shines brighter every single time. Rebels remembered.
Rebels remembered.
So just all beautiful. I think like what you were saying, Lanny, like it's the communion, like it's an actual communion. That's what's happening. Like it's the idea that you're me, I'm you, we're all each other, and that's what the force is. It's just manifestation of itself over and over again in different forms and aberrations and formations and whatever you want to call it. I mean, and we're all creatures at the end of the day, even us humans.
Yes, of course.
And I'm
we
sure
all evolved from apes. I don't know who needs to know that, but we all evolved. We're not unique. It's an evolution. It's a tree. It's a tree. It's not a ladder. Just in case anyone needs a refresher on biology. So yeah, we are all connected because we all come from the same.
And we're not nearly as smart as we think we are, or as evolved as we think we are. Yeah.
I love the idea that, probably there's alien life out there that's just been through this planet and be like, oh, that's just all dumb.
Never mind.
Like, never mind. There's zero signs of intelligence.
They're completely primitive still. Just leave them alone. Let them evolve a little more.
Come back in a few thousand years. Maybe they haven't killed themselves by
fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
So I think we're done with the conversation, right? Unless anybody has any last thoughts. I think we've dug into a little bit of, the magic that is all these creatures of Star Wars Rebels. And I really hope that we get more treatments like this in future media that Star Wars produces, that we don't forget how beautiful this was and how well it worked. And it's a big galaxy out there. We need to see more characters like this. And like Mo was saying, I think that maybe some of these characters make them the main characters, and let's see through them and see how they work within the Force and how it upends what we think about light side, dark side. There's always the one in the middle.
There's always the one in the middle.
It's always the one in the middle. I also want to give a shout out. I don't know if they've been called force sensitive, but the puffer pigs are amazing. They just look around, they smell, and if they feel threatened, they just roll around.
I totally forgot about them. Sure, let's call them force sensitive.
Let's call them.
Why not?
You know what? Lando Calrissian introduced us puffer pigs, so that should count as for something.
And at the very least, if they're not force sensitive, they are sexy, because Lando doesn't mess around with anything that is not sexy. So keep that in mind.
True.
Put that in your
That's
pipe.
very true.
Yeah.
That is true. And the force is sexy, so
yeah, it is.
Yeah. So last thoughts or
Last thoughts beyond what you said. Yeah, I definitely want to see like more of this and I want to see it translated into live action too, because I don't think it's fair for animation to be the only place where it's the only fun, where Star Wars can kind of let loose,
can be weird,
get creative and be weird, like do all these like really meaningful and like different types of explorations of what Star Wars can be. I wish live action loosened up a little bit and just did kind of similar things. I did do a post on Twitter the other day saying like, hey, I wish Star Wars were a little bit more like Star Trek, and like was unapologetic about the things that it's doing. And and what I mean by that is, you said, Star Trek has always been, and it's kind of diverging a little bit from the creatures talk, but it ties, I promise. But Star Trek has always been, since day one, never been afraid to be what it is, which is like a show and movies that are about the future and an optimistic future and a potential utopias of like how we can be as humans that are integrated and accepting and liberal, and like all these like things that some people like to use that like to categorize in a negative way as woke. But that's what Star Trek has always been, and it's never made any apologies for it. And I wish Star Wars did the same. I wish it didn't limit itself to publishing and animation to be the things that
to break boundaries only through
it aspires to be. So hopefully live action and live action series and movies take some cues and learn that these are things that we all want and that they should be doing, because other media has done it, have been successful doing it. And I want to see more of it. I want to see gay Purrgils. I want to see a bunch of weird things. It's like, come on, let's go. The time is nigh.
What do you think the Purrgils are doing hyperspacing, going through time? There's those massive Purrgil orgies. Do not discriminate. What's happening?
As long as there's consent.
Those tentacles do not discriminate.
If anyone is familiar with Japanese culture, you know what Mo's implying. That's all I'm gonna say about that. I don't need to go into details. This is a family-friendly show, goddamn. However, be careful with your YouTube searches. Be careful with your Amazon purchases. You'll find some weird stuff in there.
Don't be afraid.
Purrgil appendages.
Do not be afraid.
Explore your weird side. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's nothing wrong with it. No.
Yeah. And just remember, if you haven't listened to our Obi-Wan's Thirst Cave, we are always in favor of things getting weird, especially in Star Wars. I mean, it is a huge galaxy. Why are we not exploring the weird things?
Yeah.
That's all I have to say. But I think with that, we are done for today. Yes.
Until the next one.
Until the next one, we still have some awesome things to talk about Rebels, because if you haven't noticed, we love Rebels. # Rebels remembered. So until next time, we are Triad of the Force. Remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let us know what you think. You can find us everywhere that podcast can be found: Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, just anywhere. Search for us. Remember about the Amidala initiative, and if you are willing and able, please cooperate, because trans rights are human rights, and we are in favor of defending all human rights. So until next time, may the Force be with you.